Hey, welcome to Hold the Air podcast. My name's Rob Forbes. Seated to my left, John Cosme. Cos, we have put so much work and effort in the last 6 months in bringing this studio to life, man. And I cannot wait to unleash what we got going, to share the street with you for the last 25 years, and to have us turn the page and this is what we're doing next, man. I got to tell you, this absolutely just feels right, man. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I'm super excited. We actually talked about this probably about a year before we retired as a joke, and then we put it all together. We're super excited. Our first guest on our show, our podcast, is John Dewane. He is the current prosecutor for Ingham County. I've worked with John throughout most of my career. Rob has as well. We are stoked to have him in the studio to talk about all kinds of stuff as it relates to Ingham County and the future of the safety of Ingham County.
Hey, cheers, man.
Yes, let's do this.
John, welcome. Thanks. When Kaz and I were breathing life into this concept of what are we going to do after retirement, and this just felt so right to us to have a vehicle to really try to make a splash, really. You know what I mean? Just because we were just perpetual givers on the street, and to have something to keep that moving. When we were first dialing up names of who we wanted on here, I'm not going to lie, man, you were absolutely the first one. So thank you so much, man. So, where we kind of want to start is not everybody is familiar with Ingham County. Not everybody maybe even is familiar with where that is or who you are. So cue us up with who you are as prosecutor. How did you get here? Like a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I graduated from St. Joe High School down in St. Joe, Benton Harbor area back in 1988. Went to University of South Carolina from 1988 to 1992. Got my BA in English there. Took a couple years off. Went to Seattle. Played around out there for a couple years, and then came back to Thomas Cooley Law School from 95 to 98. Got my JD. Graduated. Went back to St. Joe. Worked in legal aid for about a year, and then I worked for my dad for about 2 years. He was an attorney down there, and then I came up here in 2001. Was hired by Stuart Dunnings as a prosecutor. And for the last 23 years, I've been an Ingham County prosecutor.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So how many trials do you think that you've done in 23 years?
Probably felony trials, probably close to 90.
Wow.
A lot of those in the last 10 years have been murder trials.
Wow. That's a hell of a resume. I can remember my first case with you. I don't know if you remember or not, but I was a young guy, and you sat me down and you kind of gave me the idea of what to expect in the courtroom. And I remember driving home thinking that was cool. That was a real cool experience.
Yeah, no, it's always important to meet with your witnesses before trial. Make sure we're on the same page with one another.
Yeah. I can't remember what kind of trial it was, but I remember when I left, I was like, that was a pretty cool experience.
Yes, sir.
So, Kaz and I being on the street for the last, 25 years or so, we understand firsthand what value is in a good professional working relationship between the police and the prosecutor's office, whether it's Ingham County or really any county. That we understand that relationship is very important. But so we understand it from the police side of it, but from the prosecutor side of it, talk to us about what the importance is of having a good working relationship with the police department.
I think it's everything. I think, we have to work hand in hand together, both the prosecution and law enforcement. And so you have to build that relationship of trust in one another to ensure that you are seeking the ultimate goal, which is justice for the victim. So I think it's very important that there's open lines of communication between both of our agencies, that there's transparency. As the prosecutor, we work closely with law enforcement, but we also have to make sure that we're all doing our job, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So again, it's super important for me to have that working relationship. And so when I was appointed in December of 2022, I noticed that over the past several years that we had lost that trust and relationship between our offices, between Ingham County Prosecutor's Office, Lansing Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, MSP. And so it was one of my goals right off the bat that first week is to meet with every chief of police in every township of this county to let them know that, hey, things are going to change, policies are going to change, and that we are going to rebuild our relationship with you. So that was one of the number one things I wanted to do when I took office.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, we felt that. I mean, we were on the ground floor for that, and I think that prior to you taking over in 2022, we were there when it was way different and the policies were different. And one particular policy that I think is important to mention is felony firearm. And not everybody out there in the viewership may not understand. We do as the police, and obviously you do as the prosecutor. But to the lay person, what is felony firearm, and why? What was the previous policy, and why did you change it?
So felony firearm is a crime. It's a 2-year mandatory prison sentence. So anybody who possesses or uses a firearm during the commission of another felony can be charged with felony firearm. And that charge was not being utilized in the prior administration. And when I took over in December of 2022, I changed that policy because what I saw was an uptick in unacceptable level of gun violence in our community, with people using and possessing firearms. And when you possess a firearm during the commission of a crime, it makes that crime much more dangerous and possibly lethal. So that was something I wanted to change, where now you're looking at possibly a felonious assault, which is only a 4-year felony. You might only be looking at 3 months in the county jail if you're convicted. But with a felony firearm, that's a mandatory 2 years now that you're going to prison. So, an individual has to think twice whether they're going to take it to trial and whether they want to risk that. So not only does it hold the offender accountable, but it also helps in resolving cases with plea agreements.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said accountability, John, because that's what was most important to us. Like we worked on the violent crime team for the Lansing Police Department during the worst time, I feel, in the history of the department, in the history of the world. We're coming out of COVID. People were isolated. Terrible things that happened in the news. The George Floyd thing was what turned us upside down. We were coming across firearms at a rate that was shocking, and it was disheartening if we developed a case and realized that this person wasn't being held accountable. Right? We don't want to send people away to prison forever, but if you've done something nasty in our community, you need to be held accountable. Period. And when you gained office, we felt like that leverage was being used again and utilized. And as an officer, that meant a ton, because we're going out doing our job, and expecting some type of flow with the prosecution. And it was nice to see that came back.
Yeah, and it seemed like previously it was okay just to have a firearm and use it in the commission of a crime. And so that's not acceptable, and you have to be held accountable. So that's why I changed that policy. And again, it's not that we hold a firm line on every case where there's felony firearm, but certainly think about it. I mean, if it's an assault with intent to murder, that's a life offense. So if you go to trial, you're looking at 18 to 25 years right off the bat. So the 2-year mandatory minimum, and that's really not affecting your guidelines. But it's more for those lower level felonies, assaultive crimes, that we can use that as possibly a plea bargain and a bargaining chip. So it helps resolve cases, but again, it's all about accountability as well.
Yeah, and it improves. I feel, every case is different. You know this. As a prosecutor, you got to go with the fact pattern for everything that you're dealing with. Sometimes when someone's held accountable the way they're supposed to be accountable, it changes the direction of their life. They're going to think, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to go to prison. All these things that come with making a poor decision because maybe you're around the wrong people doing the wrong kinds of things. As a parent, I don't think that being lenient is the best course of action all the time. And that's what it felt like. It felt like at one point we were just being lenient to be lenient rather than being accountable and letting things play out naturally.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I think, to double down on that, man, I think that you bring up a great point, Kaz, as far as accountability, but I think for the cops out there that are doing the work and as it gets to your office and beyond, I think that accountability, we're not against giving the right person a break, but it should not be we start low and go lower. We should start high, and if you deserve a break and you earn that, then we can bring it down. But it shouldn't just be you get a pass just because that's just the climate. You know what I mean?
And as a prosecutor, I don't think you should pick and choose what crimes you're going to enforce. I think you should enforce all the crimes if they're on the books.
Exactly.
So, the fact that we're going to decide we're not going to charge a certain crime, I don't accept that.
I think that's a great point that you bring up, John, because I think it's important for the viewership to understand is your office or even the police department, we're not the ones making the laws, right? If you want to complain about felony firearm, that goes down a whole nother road. That road does not go to your office or the police department for that matter. So I think that to your point is the accountability piece comes from the laws that we're enforcing were created on the books. And that's the book. That's the book that we're going by, which creates the fairness for if you do this, then this is the expectation. Am I right?
Yeah, it becomes a very slippery slope as a prosecutor if you begin to starting to choose and pick what crimes you're going to enforce. I may enforce some of these, but I might not enforce these. To me, that's a very slippery slope. And as you said, Rob, if you don't like the crime, then there's a process that you can go through to have it repealed or changed, and that's through the legislature, right?
Right.
So that's the avenue that you can take to change it. But and again, we have prosecutorial discretion. So again, if the law is on the books, I can charge it, but I may not pursue it. I may plea it out. I may not. So that's a whole thing with discretion with the prosecutor.
I love that. I love that because Rob and I, we went after guns hard. We worked VCI hard. We had a great crew. We had great supervision. We really worked hard on investigating with the best information. We would come across young people, right? And they had a firearm, and we would get them out of the car. We would counsel them right on the bumper of their car. Hey, the right way to possess a firearm is to buy it correctly, register it correctly, take the CPL class, know the do's and don'ts. And that's why we're taking your gun today. But we didn't take them to jail all the time. We would give them that lesson, and we would allow them to go home, and then we would send the report to the prosecutor's office, and we would tell them, hey, listen, maybe in a couple of weeks, a month or so, there might be a warrant for CCW or whatever the charge was at the time. But you speak about discretion. Yeah, you have to apply discretion in certain scenarios. But at the same time, I think accountability holds just as much importance in that conversation.
I agree. Common sense and discretion go a long way in our professions.
Heck yeah. Hey, folks, thanks for checking out this episode of Hold the Air podcast. Today's episode is brought to you in part by the Headroom Salon, located in beautiful Old Town, Lansing, Michigan, 1122 North Washington. If you're looking for an experienced stylist, friendly atmosphere, and a commitment to excellence, the Headroom Salon is the place for you.
Yeah, you bet. You mentioned VCI, Kaz. When we were with the Greater Lansing Violent Crime Impact Team, that was by far you and I know the by far the greatest 3 years of our careers, and it was just an indescribable commitment and experience and everything. But I love what our sergeant said at our briefing table one time, which is, if you shoot at someone, you should expect that the police are going to come after you with everything that we've got. And and that was just the mentality of, you can't just expect the police or the prosecutor's office, for that matter. We're just going to shrug our shoulders and be like, well, yeah, well, here's gun violence, but we're just in a position where we're just not going to follow through with that. We're not going to apply effort to that. I really appreciate the accountability piece, John, because that has been really that's a huge piece of what we can ask for from the police looking at the prosecutor is, we've done the work. Now it's time to hold somebody accountable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the best way to build a relationship with the community, right, is to show that the process is fair and forgiving. And I think that's what we're describing, right?
Yeah, and for sure. And like you said, when you pulled over a young individual and you had that discussion with them about, you need to do the right things if you actually want to possess a firearm. And I'm not against people possessing firearms, okay? I think that's everybody's right. But you have to do it legally, right? You have to be 21 to buy a firearm.
Yep.
You have to, if you want to carry concealed, you have to get a CPL and go through the courses and things of that nature. So, again, it is about accountability and holding people accountable. But the other thing is with young people is we have a program that we recently started, Judge Aquilina, called a weapons court for juveniles. So first-time offenders with carrying a concealed weapon. So similar to what you were saying, Kaz, it's like that night you may have pulled that person over, that youth who's possessing a gun for whatever reason they're possessing a firearm, right? Well, now we can send them through a diversion program, similar to what you said, and educate them on the dangers of possessing a firearm and why you shouldn't possess a firearm. And if you are, these are things you need to do. So that's something that I think we're really proud of. We have a graduation coming up in a couple weeks with 3 graduates from the weapons court. So that's something that a diversion program that allows the youth to be accountable, be held accountable, but also to avoid a felony conviction.
Yeah, that's fantastic, dude. I'm telling you, because Rob and I, we're the kind of same kind of cop. I can remember driving home thinking about 2 or 3 guns that we seized that night, knowing that we changed the direction of a violent act. And then, you can cut the pie right down. For me personally, half these young dudes were cool kids. Like, they were legitimate little dudes, but they were just misdirected. And wherever that misdirection comes, that's a whole nother conversation, right? Yeah. The influences that young people have nowadays, that's a lot. But man, for the volume of guns that we came across, and the kind that, we had some nasty folks, right? We had some folks that needed to be held accountable to the highest level. But at the same time, we had some misdirected kids that it was a good thing that we stopped them. It was a good thing that we held them accountable. It was a good thing that we took that gun out of their possession, because 2 weekends from now, maybe they're at a party and they do something regrettable, and now they've lost their freedoms. And that's
or
their life. Absolutely, or their life. What other programs are you familiar with, like here in Lansing, that are working towards like the goals that we're describing?
Well, specifically with gun violence, we have Advanced Peace that's been in our city for the last year and a half. And so Advanced Peace is, a community intervention program where they try to seek out the most prolific shooters in our town. And typically those are more youthful offenders. And they're trying to end the cyclical and retaliatory violence that we're seeing among our juveniles at this time, in Lansing specifically. The non-fatal shootings that we're having right now have gotten to really unacceptable levels. So they're in doing their work, trying to prevent the next homicide, the next shooting going down. And so that's something that's really great. You have the Village, Lansing 360, these other community groups that are working together. And then you have law enforcement, proactive law enforcement, proactive prosecution. So all these groups are coming together to try to address this gun violence that we've seen in our community and try to stop these non-fatal shootings that we're seeing.
Yeah, I've researched Advanced Peace quite a bit. I think it's a fantastic concept. I look forward maybe in the future talking with the folks that work in Advanced Peace. I think that their model and how they're addressing contacting youthful offenders or potential youthful offenders, I think it's a fantastic concept. I do personally endorse any effort that's done in this city to curb and prevent violence. But it has to be honest. It has to be meant with intention. It can't be divisive. It can't be, we all have to eat off the same plate, so to speak. And I really think that if we do that, the relationship between the community and the police department, if it's good, then we'll see the results. We'll see a decrease in crime. We'll see a better relationship with the police department. In my 25 years, this city is amazing. My wife owns this building. It's in Old Town. She's a proud business owner in the city of Lansing. Rob and I both live in the city. This is a great city, but we have to be consistent with how we address the probably the most important thing, which is violent crime, and I'm super excited just to sit here and talk with you, because I would have never thought 20 years ago I'd be sitting in my wife's basement in a little studio talking to John Dewane about some real stuff, and I just appreciate it.
Absolutely. So turn the page. You know, as a trial attorney, and now as the leadership, the boss of your office, what is it that you look for as someone that's looking to come on your team as prosecutor? That if I'm out of law school and I'm called and I'm pulled to be the prosecutor, and Ingham County is a good fit for me, what is it that you're looking for?
You know, what I'm looking for is somebody who can, again, use their common sense and discretion. You know, we would like to bring people on board, sometimes laterally from another office that has trial experience. So, you know, I'm looking for people that are comfortable in front of people, you know, a jury, people that are smart, aggressive, want to work hard. Unfortunately, my office has had quite a bit of turnover in the last year and a half under my administration, and it's disturbing because I'm seeing people leaving for, and I can't fault them for this, right? But they're going to the feds making maybe $20,000 to $30,000 more, and I can't fault that. I can't match it. But I don't fault them for doing that. And then I have others that go laterally and may have less of a stressful job and make a little bit more money. So it's difficult as an employer now to recruit. Not as many people going to law school. Not many people want to get into government work, as you know, as police officers. We've really seen a trend going downward. For whatever reason, it could be the George Floyd incidents and other horrific murders that have happened. You know, but we used to be, the prosecution used to wear the white hat, and I just don't see that happening anymore. Like, I don't see attorneys and young law students wanting to go into government work anymore. So that's difficult as an employer, is that retention and recruiting.
Yeah, fair. So, you know, it's similarly with the police department. I can tell you this, for the man sitting next to me and myself, right? Of course, there is other things that we could have done or chosen a different route that would have made more money than being cops in the street, right? We never chose to be promoted. We never wanted any of that. And we left exactly how basically we started. And I say that to piggyback on your comment, is it wasn't just about the money for us. Right now, I think that it's fair that if you quit paying me, we'd probably quit showing up, right? But at the same time, it's a calling, right? It's not just about the money. It's about having a vehicle, for us anywhere in the street. It's about having a vehicle to make a difference. And of course, you know, we're not solving the world out there, but I can tell you this over and over again, with that kid or with that mom or with that family, it mattered, right? And that's what keeps you going out in the street, is, you know, you get these victories where you can see that influence that we had at that particular time, it was exactly where I needed to be. And boy, you cannot replace that feeling of this counted, this mattered. When it needed it most, I got this call and it made a difference. Now, is it similar to that with the prosecutor's office? Like, as you say, you could go from your office somewhere else and make more money, but do you find, being a trial attorney, that you have that prosecutor specifically, do you have that same drive, that you're called, like this is about the greater good?
You know, Rob, you took the word right out of my mouth. It's a calling, right? We didn't get into this profession to be rich, right? You have to love what you do. And the satisfaction that I get out of my job every day, I would never change it. There's not been a day that I've gone to work where I've regretted becoming a prosecutor or being a prosecutor. And the gratitude that you receive, for example, after a homicide conviction, where I've been with this family for a year and a half, maybe 2 years, we've formed these relationships, this trust, and to be able to look at a mom who's lost their loved one, or maybe their son or daughter, and to give them that satisfaction of that justice that they've finally wanted, to put somebody behind bars for the rest of their life, hold them accountable for the murder of their son or daughter, is amazing. You can't, there's no price tag for that. When I get that hug from that mom, or even a father, and they're crying in my arms, you just can't. There's no monetary amount of money you can put on that. So it is a calling.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, we literally get invited into these people's lives for one purpose only, and that's to help them heal. And when we get an opportunity, if we do our police work correctly, if we present you with the right information, if we follow up, if we have great detectives, by the way, at LPD, man, I don't know of any other profession short of being like a surgeon where you would feel like you literally were part of someone's healing because you put your nose down and did your job. I would do this career over and over and over again. 100%.
Bet. So turn to the page. Let's you know, we touched on the violent crime and that being really in your wheelhouse and how you're really marching towards an impact in changing that trend here in Ingham County. Let's talk about your federal partners for a second, because I think that this is worth mentioning. You know, when it wasn't that long ago, and I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think that you would agree. It wasn't that long ago where, as cops on the street, getting a gun in an illegal firearm seizure was fairly hard to do, right? And it seems like the trend, especially 2020 and beyond, it's gone rampant, right? Now, part of that ratcheting up, I think it's all related that, you have way more illegal firearm seizures, you have way more gun violence, you have way more people that we're trying to hold accountable. And I think technology is also a piece of this puzzle, Kaz. Why don't you talk to us about Glock switches and how, and we'll get into John, how Glock switches, what they are, and how our federal partners tie in with that.
Well, personally, and I'll never, as a father of two, they're grown. My kids are grown now, but I know how easy it is to be seduced by social media and platforms, and it's not going away. It's just part of what we are now. I would use like the Kia vehicle thing. So a while ago there was a guy that got on the internet and showed everybody how to steal a Kia vehicle. And it was the #1 stolen car in the country.
He didn't just steal it. He steal it with like you could bend over to tie your shoes and you get up where's my car? It's that fast.
So it just overwhelmed law enforcement agencies. No different than this Glock switch we're talking about. So you get this little switch and you can put it on it has to be a Glock firearm. You put it on the Glock firearm and it turns it into an automatic weapon. So you don't have to pull the trigger once. Well, I'm sorry. Typically, you just pull the trigger once, and the firearm works. Well, with a switch, you pull it, and it will empty out a 16-round magazine, 12-round magazine within seconds. Like we have a video of it actually. If Z could pull it up.
This is semi-automatic. A single pull of the trigger, and I'll do 3
So here
shots.
he is, semi-automatic mode. Looks like he's got probably a 30-round magazine. Looks like to me. Would you agree with that, Kaz? 30 rounds. I think it's safe to say it's 30. So he just fired 3, so he's got 27 rounds left. If it's a 30-round mag, and not more than 3 seconds. Those 27 rounds are just that fast.
That's a disaster.
That is an absolute disaster. And
you got a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid at a party, behaving like a 17 or 18-year-old kid should at a party. But the only problem is he's got a gun in his waistband with a switch. And it's a power thing. It's a control thing. In the streets, it plays out way different. They pull the trigger on that, and now you have just mayhem. So to put it in perspective, 25 years, both of us worked at LPD. Prior to 2020 and COVID and George Floyd and all this gun culture, it just seemed like it to explode. Getting firearms, we had to work at it. Post 2020, we were getting firearms all the time. The Glock switch thing became trending on platforms, social media, and now we're getting them all the time.
yes, we are.
And it's frightening to think that law enforcement has to try to navigate around this firearm. That's just it's irrational. Like if you pull the trigger on this thing, it's a terrible gun to have out in the street in the hands of someone who's not being responsible. So the hope is that if someone is caught with this firearm, they've got to be held accountable. I mean,
way more.
because it's easy to talk about something that didn't happen, right? But when it actually happens and 4 people are dead, 5 people are injured, and we talked about accountability earlier. It has to happen. You don't ever want that mistake to happen again. So how does your office deal with the accountability of a Glock switch as it pertains to the ATF and other agencies?
Sure. And just going back to that video, that's a trained law enforcement officer shooting that firearm.
Right.
So just think about when that Glock switch is engaged and he fires off 27 rounds. I mean, he has pretty good control of that firearm because he's an officer. Think about that same gun in the hands of a 17 or 18-year-old and how indiscriminately that gun is being fired because you can't control it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have, at that point, multiple people could be murdered, shot, injured. So again, what we do on the federal counterpart of this, working with the ATF and the U.S. Attorney's Office with Mark Totten over at the Western District, that's who we really partner with a lot over there. And for example, he had a Safe Summer initiative that was started back in May and goes through, I believe, probably September. But if a gun is taken off an individual that does have a Glock switch, that'll be referred for federal prosecution. And now you have starting to have mandatory minimums. I think it might be 5 years or whatever. So, that's one way to address that issue. But it is concerning the amount of these Glock switches that are out there. I mean, we're seeing them every day. And it's crazy. And then you also have that other thing where the ghost guns, where people can make a gun from their computer. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah,
That's not traceable.
No serial
That
numbers.
doesn't have, doesn't have any serial numbers. Yeah. So again, that's a federal crime. So we are working with our federal counterparts when cases are brought to us to refer those for federal prosecution.
Yeah, as it should be.
As took words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have that, the expectation is you're going to go federally and you're going to be held way higher to a standard than just diversion or something else, in my opinion anyway. Like, there's just way too much going on there.
And I want to bring up, because you said about social media and whatnot, when we get a murder case or assault with attempt murder or something like that, we typically seize the phones of the individuals that are being arrested or who may be witnesses. And I can't tell you the amount of times we go through their phones after they've been downloaded with the videos of young individuals. I'm talking 13, 14, with firearms, extended clips, semi-automatic guns, AR-15s. It's really out of control.
Yeah. And you wonder, like, how do we make it up? Like, how do we stay at least shoulder to shoulder with the pace? Because when we worked in VCI, like I said, I mean, it wasn't difficult to go out and use best information and make contact with folks that were illegally in possession of firearms. And what was so frustrating was, during that time frame, and I don't want to get into bonds and all that stuff, but it was people were reacting a certain way to how things needed to be done, and we would see someone who we took a firearm off of out the very next day. We would get them again with the firearm, and they would be out. So it was hard to see, because we knew that eventually that young person was either going to get shot, shoot someone, or die, and that was frustrating, very frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine, and we saw the same thing. Person gets a CCW, gets a bond, bonds out, and within a week, another CCW gets another bond and comes back. I mean, at some point, again, it goes back to accountability. Mm-hmm. Where are we going to put this individual? How are we going to stop the behavior? So, yeah, it was a frustrating time.
Yeah.
So, on the heels of that, and you just, when you said that, it sparked this in my mind. I think a huge part of, we've said the word accountability a number of times in here and everything. And I think that turning the page, there was recent legislation about gun safe storage. And essentially, and you're the attorney, we're not, but essentially, if I understand it correctly, safe storage is, I have a firearm that I legally own as dad, for example. It's registered to me. Everything about it is above board and legal. But if I don't store that firearm securely and safely. And for example, my son gets my firearm and goes out and somebody gets hurt with the firearm that registers to me. It's no longer with the way that it was, where we're just holding the individual accountable for the actual crime. But now we're coming back to mom, dad, and beyond. You know, there's been some active shooter incidents that this law is applied to. I think that holding parents accountable, specifically in my example here, I think that it's absolutely the right direction, but I would really appreciate if you would explain safe storage, what it is and how it applies.
Yeah, I mean, so as a gun owner, you have a responsibility to lock up that gun, to be safe, to make sure it doesn't get in the hands of your child or anybody else. And I support that law that was passed by Governor Whitmer, as well as universal background checks. So again, you have this responsibility as a parent, as a gun owner, and if you fail to lock up your firearm and your child gets it, maybe takes it to school in their backpack, well, I'm going to hold you accountable for that because you had a responsibility to safely store that firearm, and now your child has a gun at school. If your child takes that gun and shoots himself or herself or shoots somebody else, well, now we're talking about a 5-year felony. And it just escalates from there. If somebody's murdered with that gun, your child takes that and commits a mass murder, you're going to be held accountable, just similar to what happened over in Oakland County with the Crumbleys.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out Hold the Air podcast. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Blue Arrow Consultants, LLC.com. Blue Arrow Consultants offers a variety of services to help you, your church, or your business plan, prevent, and prepare for an active violent incident. From beginner tactical to advanced tactical and beyond, protect you, your family, and your businesses better with Blue Arrow Consultants, LLC.com.
Right.
You know, and that's, I think, why that law came about, obviously, is we had that mass shooting in Oakland over there. And, you know, the prosecutor, Karen McDonald, charged them with second-degree murder. But now, with the new passages of the law, this law, it's like strict liability. I mean, it's a mandatory, I believe, 15 years.
Wow. So do you, obviously, I think it's very clear in the case of the Crumblies, like you mentioned, where it's something violent has happened, right? And now we have a mass shooting, a disaster on our hands, and families are just upended forever, right? Like, I think those examples are crystal clear of when it would apply. But do you know, does the law also apply? What if, in the case of me and my son, if my son takes my firearm and gets caught with just CCW, he doesn't pull the trigger, he does nobody's injured, does that still apply? Like, just having it, do you know, does the law address that?
Yeah, I think it would address that because, again, if the gun's in your home and your child's a minor and you failed to secure that firearm, either lock it up at night, put your gun lock on it, whatever, then you're liable for that. That your child should not have access to your firearm, period.
I agree. I mean, Kaz, how many times on the street did we deal with this prior to this legislation? How many times did we deal with a young person that had mom or dad's gun, didn't pull the trigger, nobody got hurt, so to speak, but in the process of us policing the street, we came across and changed the trajectory of this firearm that registered to mom or dad, and Junior had it. I mean, there was a lot.
Yeah, you could tell. I mean, like right off the bat, you made your legal stop. You pull them over. You walk up, you talk to them. The chest is going up and down. Sweat's coming off. They're young. They can't answer your questions, and you're like, something's going on here. You further the investigation. You seize the firearm. You run the firearm. Comes back to mom, and then you sit down and talk with them. Like, what were you thinking? Well, everybody's got it. I had one kid tell me, if you don't have it, people look at you like you're weird.
And that's where we got to change the culture, Kaz. That's exactly where we have to stop that mentality of our youth thinking it's okay to possess a firearm, because it's not.
It's not.
Because it's only going to lead to several different outcomes.
Yeah.
Going to jail or prison, or you're going to get murdered or shoot somebody, right?
Yeah.
Those are the three outcomes that I can see.
Yep.
So we got to change this culture that this is acceptable to carry a firearm. And I'm tired of seeing it glorified in music, glorified in videos, glorified in social media, that owning a gun and a Glock switch is acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to start. We have to have that conversation with our youth that it's not okay. This isn't normal society.
No, I agree. And I don't know what the age would be, like 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, but the pull is unbelievable. Social media has a pull like nothing else on the planet.
Well, we have sex ed, right? 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah.
Why don't we have some type of education about gun violence?
Yeah. Yep.
And gun possession and the dangers of it.
Yeah. And like I
It's
said
just as
before too.
dangerous.
Yeah. The organizations in the city that are trying to teach young people how to possess firearms correctly, the responsibility of owning a firearm, that's awesome. That's fantastic. But it can't be connected to the idea that you have to have it, when you go to a party. You have to have it when you're riding with your friends in the car. No, you don't. Like you said, it's only going to lead to some type of irrational decision made when they've got into a little bit of alcohol, they smoked a little bit of weed, and now their common sense is out the window. Yeah, they were trained properly to have it. They understand the do's and don'ts, but at 1 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning at a local park, all hell's going to break loose.
And let's remember, again, as I said before, you cannot legally purchase a firearm from a federally licensed dealer until you're 21.
Yeah.
So anybody under 21 possessing a gun other than a rifle to hunt or a shotgun to hunt, that's illegal.
Yep. And
Handgun's illegal to possess under 21.
Going back
There it is.
Yep. Going
For
back
the man
a little
himself.
bit. Yeah, exactly. And going back a little bit too, I can remember when pre-2020, Rob and I, we came across a lot of guns, and the guns were average, right? Post-2020, these guns were nice. So it's like, wait a minute. Now, how are these guns? And then you run it, and then you find out that the gun was purchased, reported stolen. Now you start thinking, okay, wait a minute. Was this a straw purchase? Which is someone going into a licensed dealer, buying a firearm for someone else, but covering it up because they're legal and they don't have any felony convictions. So going back to the partnership with the ATF, and I know that the ATF agents that work currently and have before with our department are fantastic, and they've addressed straw purchasing, and we should continue to do that. And with your office, I think, with the working relationship, we just stay consistent with it. If we stay consistent with it, we're in the race. If we don't, we're gonna get buried.
Yeah.
Really, where I would really like to we haven't touched on it, but I would really like your perspective as the leader of your office, as the elected official that all final decisions stop at your desk. And we appreciate your influence, by the way, if you can't tell, right? But what, as someone in that position, what would you tell the officers that are on the street doing the work, who maybe is brand new or newer? What is it that your office, like, what do you need from them to do your job effectively? Because ultimately it starts in the street and then it comes to you. What is it that they can do to be better? Because ultimately that's a real passionate part of where we're at, is we want to have a vehicle that always, if we can help the newer officer get sharper and better, we want to capitalize on that. We have you in the room here. We'd be a fool to overlook that.
Yeah, well, you're the only profession that you're always got a camera on you, right? So you have a body-worn camera. So there's always this Monday morning quarterback going on. So I would say to the younger officers, look, you're always on camera. So just remember that. Be kind to people. Be nice. Do your job, right? Report writing. Do good reports. Your report, is in your report should reflect what's on your body cam. It shouldn't be differ. Those are some things. And then have an open dialogue with the prosecutor's office, right? Again, we have to build this trust relationship. And so our office should be contacting you before you get on the stand and telling you, look, this is the questions I'm going to ask you, but to prepare yourself for getting on, because that's sometimes, as a new officer, a nerve-wracking experience, right? Getting in front of a jury or getting in front of a judge and trying to testify and then being cross-examined by a defense attorney. So again, a lot of it is just being familiar with your case, know your case, but also meet with us or we'll meet with you to prep you for that.
Absolutely. And I think that you touched on the body cams, and this is absolutely huge, because Kaz and I were there before body cams, when body cams came out, and then beyond, right? So to somebody that's brand new, that all they know is body cam, we had to adapt to that, and that's I mean, a lot of. I mean, I don't care what you do for a living. It doesn't need to be a cop on the street, or it can be anything. But when you have the mindset of everything that I do is recorded and thereby criticized, right, wrong, or indifferent, boy, that can be hard to do, right? It can be hard to do, especially when you have somebody's freedom that's on the line because they did something violent, right?
Yeah, and I'd love to emphasize the fact that as a young officer, it's not going to be perfect, right? But you have to. I agree. You have to win the show. You have to be professional. Yeah, sometimes some words slip out here and there, but these situations that we get into sometimes are life or death, literally life or death. So I shout out to the young officers that have a hard time holding their tongue and every now and then a cuss word comes out. But it's a scary situation when you're looking down some of the scenarios that we come across. But at the same time, I hope our administration, and I know that they do, can understand that. And then as you get years on, you become better, and it becomes just second nature just to be able to control your emotions because you have to. But yeah, I love the body camera. I think the body camera is one of the best things that ever happened in law enforcement.
Yep.
I think every agency in the country should have them. I think it's just as important as national security because every day our officers are hitting the streets, and we have to be held accountable. We cuss words and stuff like that. Yeah, whatever. Be better. But egregious stuff, there's no room for that.
No, and I very much appreciate you hitting on that. We're not defending misconduct. Nobody would ever get behind that. But I think that the pitfall for the new officer or newer officer is because it's on body cam. I don't need to do a strong report because it's recorded. If anybody has any questions, push play. And ultimately, when I was a field training officer, and I'm sure you too, as a training officer, newer officers that are training, especially, tend to have the mindset of, why do I even need to do a report? It's all recorded. It reminds me of that scene. AZ, pull it up. Remember that movie? It's a cheesy movie with Joe Pesci, My Cousin Vinny. Remember that movie? Right? Yeah. Where he's in court, right? Put up. Yeah, here it is right here. He's in court, right? And,
everything that guy just says bullshit.
Yeah, you don't want to look like that.
No, you don't want to look like that. But ultimately, I feel like that is how a body cam is almost a crutch, right? Like everything else is just BS, right? Everything else is just nonsense because if you want to challenge anything that I did or didn't do, play the video. But what you're saying is that doesn't work, right? Like new officers have to write strong factual reports. Why?
Well, one, you got to have PC to make a stop and an arrest. So you got to document the things that you're observing to give you that PC. But it's also difficult to put that in words sometime, especially as a new officer. I mean, like Kaz was saying the other time, or a little bit ago, when he pulled over a car, you can see the nervousness and the chest rising. You can write that in a report. But boy, you play that body cam and you can actually see what Kaz is seeing from a lay perspective. And like, oh yeah, now I see what Kaz was talking about and describing. But again, sometimes it's difficult to put that in words in a report.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. These body cam videos are a game changer for law enforcement and for prosecution, because now you can testify about it on the stand, and then we can play it for the jury. And like, I see what Rob was talking about.
Yep.
I see that nervousness that child had or that young individual had. I see what he saw in plain view, the firearm under the seat. I'm looking through Rob's eyes now.
There you go.
If you were given a closing monologue, right? If you're saying to, because I know you're up for election. If you were saying something to Ingham County residents, the people that see this podcast, what is your goal? What's the future of the Ingham County Prosecutor's Office? What do you want to see from new prosecutors when they come into your office? What's the expectation?
Well, again, my goal is, again, to try to reduce the violent crime in our city, especially these non-violent or non-fatal shootings that we're seeing the increase of. Really address that with our youthful offenders, because that's really where the majority of these non-violent shootings are coming from. Continue to work reducing domestic violence in our community is one of the big things I'm an advocate for. And we will prosecute those cases seriously, sometimes on evidence-based prosecution, which means we'll do it without the victim if we have to. One of the concerns that I've seen in my career is the mental health system is broken. We don't have enough facilities and enough providers to provide treatment to the mentally ill. A lot of my homicides, I've probably done 20-some plus murder trials. Probably half of those are mentally ill individuals who didn't get the treatment they needed, and then something bad happens. So those are things that I'm focusing on. And again, trying to build up my office with really good attorneys, prosecutors that are going to try cases. I think the overall thing that I really want the public to know is, I'm here to work hard. I go to district court. I've covered court for my APAs when they want a vacation or they're out sick. I currently have murder trials that I'm trying. I'm trying a case in about 3 weeks from now. So, I'm your prosecutor. I am here to work hard. I want to be transparent with the citizens of Ingham County and be honest and open with them. So those are the things that I've seen for the next 4 years in the future of this county.
Yeah. So personally, I flat out endorse you. I've known you for too long.
Appreciate that.
I think the prosecutor's office is headed in the right direction. Shout out to all your prosecutors that I've ever worked with in the past. I've always been treated fairly, and it's been a very, very fun experience to go up there and meet the different personalities that work the different types of cases. I know we're headed in the right direction with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come down here and talk to us and kick off our podcast. All the nervousness that goes into it, and all the planning and everything that goes into it. I appreciate you.
Well, and I want to say I appreciate you guys. We've worked together over the 20 years, 22 years. And I can tell you that you two put your life on the line every day for the citizens of Ingham County. And especially when you were doing the work that you're doing in the VCI unit and whatnot, the amount of probably murders that you prevented and the amount of guns that you took off the streets made this community safer. So as a citizen of this county, I want to thank you both for your excellence and your hard work over all those years. You guys were some of the best to work with for sure.
Yeah.
Well, this guy is the best. He's just a flat out machine.
All right. Hey, so thanks, John, for coming on, taking time out on a Sunday to come down to the studio. Thank you, Rob. This is everything that I thought it was going to be, and I hope in the future we can talk to meaningful guests and have meaningful conversation, and hopefully be a part of what works in Ingham County. Yep.
Thanks, man. Pleasure, bro.
Okay.
Thank you. John, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.